We will now explore an example of a Belbin team role report. As we go through it, we will refer to the person who completed this report as the candidate and the people who were asked to be observers as observers. I'd like you to think of the team roles as descriptions of the general tendencies and preferences a person exhibits in a work setting. The question the report aims to help you answer is how you can make the best possible contribution to your team's success. We begin your Belbin report by exploring your team role preferences. This information is based solely on your self-perception with no input from observers. It's about how you see yourself. It's a cognitive exercise. When you completed your self-perception, you allocated points against different statements. Each one of those statements represented a team role. So, if you put a 5 against a statement that said, "I bring a lot of creativity to the team," that would have allocated points to the creative role, the plant role. Or, if you placed points against a statement like, "I can smooth things over in the team," points would be allocated to the team worker role. When we look at this page, we see how your team roles were ranked using a scale from 0 to 100 and whether they fall into the category of preferred roles, manageable roles, or least preferred roles. A preferred role is one you play most in a team and is something you probably like doing and have talent in. As a general guideline, a natural team role falls above the 65th percentile. A manageable role is a team role that you may not naturally use, but you could stretch into if needed. It falls between the 25th and 65th percentile. And a least preferred role is one you play the least in a team, or possibly a week in. A least preferred role falls under the 25th percentile. So, for this candidate, based on how they allocated their points, we can see their preferred roles are team worker, coordinator, and resource investigator, with team worker ranked first, coordinator second, and resource investigator third. Their manageable roles are plant and specialist, with specialist ranked fourth and plant fifth. And their least preferred roles are shaper, monitor evaluator, implementer, and completer finisher, all at 0. There are 2 factors that account for how strong a person is in a particular role. First, the strength may be a reflection of their talent, or lack thereof, in that particular role. Or secondly, it could be situational. The information shown in a Belbin report is a snapshot of a candidate's behaviors in a particular job or team and at a particular point in time. It could be that a person does not need to play a role or does not get the opportunity to play a role on the team. In the case of the candidate's report, we see a fairly even distribution between the 3 categories: 3 in the preferred roles, 2 in the manageable roles, and 4 in the least preferred roles. However, sometimes this is not the case. For example, the majority of the roles may fall into the manageable category. When this occurs, it could be an indication of flexibility and adaptability, or it could indicate that a person does not fully understand the strengths they bring to the team. Every team role has strengths or contributions associated with it, and sometimes, but not always, those strengths are accompanied by associated or allowable weaknesses. On this page, we move into exploring what portion of each of your team roles is related to strengths and what portion is associated with allowable weaknesses. This is based solely on your observer's input, not your self-perception. Here we see that there are horizontal bars for each team role. Any portion of a team role that is to the right of the dividing line is considered to be related to strengths. The amount of the bar to the left of the dividing line is how much of a role is considered to be related to an allowable weakness. We want to keep an eye on allowable weaknesses to ensure they do not negatively impact individual or team performance. If they do, they become disallowable. This page displays a comparison of how our observers see us and how we see ourselves for each specific team role. It allows us to first explore if there's a high degree of coherence in self and observer perceptions. The more aligned one is with how others perceive us, the higher the coherence. For example, there's a higher degree of coherence between the candidate and observers for the resource investigator and coordinator roles than for the plant and team worker roles. Coherence is a vital component in productive relationships with other people. Second, this page allows us to discover in which team roles big differences exist between our perceptions and those of our observers. For example, for this candidate in the plant role, we notice the self-perception is much lower than that of the observers. And this signal is that we may have a Ferrari in the garage. Let's say you have this very expensive sports car that you won in a lottery. You know nothing about cars. You park it in the garage and never drive it. And then one day someone comes along and says, "Do you realize what you have here, how valuable it is?" The same could be said about a strong team role, that it is a Ferrari in the garage, a strength that you don't realize you have. Ferraris in the garage can be a lost resource to the team. If you are unaware of strengths that you bring to the team, these could be assets that are going to waste. We tend to underestimate our strengths because they are easy for us, and we can't believe that other people don't find them as easy to execute as we do. Coming back to page 5, let's now look at the opposite situation to that of the Ferrari in the garage. This is where a person ranks themselves highly and their observers' rankings are much lower, such as with the team worker role, where the candidate's self-perception is 100%, but the candidate's observers rank them at the 50th percentile. What could the possible causes for this overestimation in the strength of the team worker be? The first is, it could be situational. The job just doesn't allow the candidate to be able to display those talents within the team. Or secondly, maybe the candidate isn't aware that they aren't as strong in the role as they could be. This becomes a good platform for further exploration. For example, thinking about why the gap exists and what can be done to adjust it. Moving on to the next page of the Belbin report, we see the rank of your roles from 1 to 9 and the relative strengths of the roles based on your self-perception and observer feedback aggregated. Here we can see that the overall number 1 role for the candidate is a resource investigator role, which is at the 90th percentile, while the number 9 role is completer finisher, which is below the 10th percentile. This page is helpful because team role feedback is also presented. It provides information which can help you play to your strengths. What we see is a narrative based on a person's top 2 roles and their bottom role. On page 7, a deeper analysis is provided. Page 8 reviews suggested work styles. I call this page the Power Alley page. Here, you look at your top 4 roles in more depth. We look at pairs of roles within your top 4 roles and, depending on the pairing, identify work styles that result from the combination of roles. This allows you to see how strong you are in various combinations, which helps you in creating a more versatile approach to dealing with others. Versatility is a key factor associated with effective leadership. So for the candidate, the combination of the resource investigator and coordinator roles would be associated with strong facilitation, and the combination of the resource investigator and team worker role would allow the candidate to excel at liaising. On this page, you see the breakdown of how your roles were ranked. First, you are presented with another view of your team roles based only on your self-perception. Then you are presented with more information from your observers. The observers go through a similar exercise as you did when you allocated points against different statements, except they are presented with a list of words and are asked to check mark those words that apply to the candidate. As with the self-perception, words are attached to particular team roles. So in this example, one observer, Jane Crow, through the check mark she chose for the candidate, selected words that are attached to the resource investigator role, and it was the candidate's number 1 role. The completer finisher was number 9. Meanwhile, Jack Payne chose words that resulted in the candidate having the number 1 role of plant and the number 9 role of monitor evaluator. The observer's overall rating, which is the aggregate of all the observers, is provided here. This line is interesting because it shows the total picture of how everybody sees you. And in comparing these results to how you saw yourself in the self-perception line above, you can see what the key differences are between your self-perception and the perceptions of your observers, or where there is strong agreement between your perception and how others see you. For example, for this candidate, the resource investigator role exhibits a very consistent pattern for the observers and the candidate's self-perception. It is either in the first, second, or third role. This is not the case for the team worker role, where there is much less agreement between the self-perception and observer perceptions. The team worker role is the top role in the candidate's self-perception, but between the third and sixth positions for the observers. Lastly, the bottom line is a combination of the self-perception and the observer's views, which is the overall team role composition for the candidate. It is important to note that some individuals may see blank boxes on their report in the observer responses. If a role is not listed, this indicates that no words associated with that team role were selected by the observers. On page 10, we see the complete list of words your observers could choose from to describe your behaviors. Beside each word, you'll see a number. This represents the number of check marks your observers allocated to each word to describe you. There are strict criteria for providing check marks. Observers are asked to decide if the person being rated is above average in a strength, and then to use 1 check mark if this is the case. If the person is very much above average in this strength, the person can choose 2 check marks, but the number of words that are allowed to have 2 check marks is limited. When your observers select a particular word, it has a number of impacts. First, each word is related to a specific team role. So when chosen, it allocates points to that team role, making it more likely that team role is highly ranked. Second, as discussed on page 4, each team role also has some component of it related to strengths and the other related to allowable weaknesses. If a word chosen is italicized, it means that it is related to an allowable weakness and will contribute to the bar to the left of the dividing line. Let's look at an example. Encouraging of others received 10 check marks, so each of the 5 observers must have given it a double check mark for a total of 10. It is not italicized, which means it is related to the strength side of the team role it is associated with. The list of observer responses brings up another interesting point to consider. What people do not say about you is very important. For instance, realistic is a strength word that received 0 check marks. Therefore, no observer felt the candidate demonstrated this behavior, or felt other behaviors were much more prominently displayed. This may be a behavior for the candidate to build upon if, for example, their job requires that strength. Note that the Belbin process respects confidentiality. The only information that is attributed back to observers is the rank order of roles from 1 to 9 that are shown throughout the report, not the words and phrases shown on this page.